Hi everyone. First and foremost, I want to apologize. I'm so sorry I slept through our scheduled time. Um, I've just been so stressed about everything going on, between my dissertation and being stuck at home for coronavirus. I'm supposed to be going home for Easter. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that anymore, but I have to get home because my mom it's just gotten worse. Um, so I am so sorry. I hope this makes up for it. I am going to record going through each of the chapters for what you need to know, and then post this on eCampus. So, I apologize. I'm so sorry. I just, I didn't sleep at all last night, and then I finally fell asleep at 10 a.m. I had probably 7 alarms set, slept through all of them. It probably wasn't that many. I probably had like four, but I slept through all of them. So I'm so sorry. I feel terrible. I set this time up. I know many of you had Zoomed in to do the review, and from the bottom of my heart, I do apologize for wasting your time. That is so unlike me. I'm normally very good about, meeting deadlines and everything. So I'm just so sorry. I feel very bad. Um, with that said, I'm going to go ahead and jump right into the Exam 2 study guide. So the first question from chapter 6 says, no specific examples of how we see vocalics across our intrinsic, iconic, arbitrary codes, and how do they relate to their respective codes. So if you go to chapter 6, it's this first couple of slides. So intrinsic codes are these vocalizations that have some sort of survival value. So when we cry, that signals for help. We also talk about parentese. So this is baby talk, but really it's, high pitched or very focused on the child and what the child is doing. Talk from the parent to the infant, and it promotes bonding and early developmental skills. So we can, with these parentese sounds, we can discriminate between threatening, so growling, versus inviting, babies cooing. We can discriminate between those two sounds. And we actually recognize people from their vocal cues. So even at 3 days old, babies are able to tell their mothers from other women's voices. Next, we have iconic codes. And these are pretending to sound angry, sad, to cry, impersonating others. So we might, use iconic codes to pretend to be mad about something or impersonate our friends. And we use iconic codes sometimes for deception. So we pretend to be somebody else to fool someone. But we also pretend to do it just to be funny. Arbitrary codes are accents and learned stereotypes. So thinking about like the British accent, there are tons of British accents, but we learn the basic and we make that into a stereotype. And anytime you say somebody's from England, you get that, oh, I'm from England, I have an accent, I've got a British accent, right? But that's not the only kind of accent, but we have this learned stereotype about what that means. We have interpretations of vocal emblems, but these interpretations do vary across culture, right? So, you know, whistling at somebody as they walk by, that's a very American thing to do. If you went to Japan, you would not see that, right? And then social etiquette rules also vary. So here in America, people don't really belch loudly or vocally after a meal, right? They can, but they really don't. In other cultures, that is a sign that that was a very good meal, and it is seen as disrespectful if you don't do it. So, these change across contexts and cultures. So know what paralanguage is. Paralanguage is the qualities and sounds that accompany a spoken message, right? So It's not really what we say, but how we say it, where we put emphasis. Um, know the key attributes: loudness, pitch, duration, rate, articulation, and pronunciation. So intensity is loudness. How loud are you? Pitch is the range of your voice. Duration is how long a sound is made. Rate is the regularity or speed of the pitch. Articulation is the clearness and control, so the physical production of speech. And pronunciation is related to articulation, but it's the accepted standard. So articulation is saying, I cannot go there. I do not. I have not, not using slang or contractions. Pronunciation would be the accepted standard. So where I'm from in Illinois, it is pronounced Appalachia. I moved here and I had a ton of people tell me I was wrong, which, I tend to believe the people who live here because they live here, right? It's pronounced Appalachia. That is pronunciation because I'm just varying the same word. Okay. Next question was articulation and pronunciation. So I just went over that, but in the study guide, it says, saying working instead of workin'. If you watch Shameless, don't talk like Fiona. Fiona always drops the G at the end of her words. I was working on that. We were eating that, right? Pronunciation. In the study guide, it says saying mountaineer instead of mountaineer. I don't know who would say mountaineer, but if they pronounce it that way, they're wrong. Characteristics of a person that we can change through vocal expressions. So, not change, gauge, I'm sorry. So, gauge, we can gauge the sex of a person. Are they male? Are they female? We can gauge the social status. Are they somebody who sounds like they have high social status, high social class, are pretty well off, or are they low class? We can tell their role. People who have prestigious jobs typically talk different than those who work at a gas station. Typically, by their vocal expressions, we can tell their personality. We can gauge their attractiveness or our perception of their attractiveness. We can tell their emotional states as well as their conversational intent, right? I can tell if you're going to talk to me solely for the fact that you want to ask me something. The next question says distinguish between voice sets, voice characterizers, and voice qualities. So voice sets are related to the speaker's identity and they help us interpret their words. Let me get back to the slides for this. They provide us the context or background which we're evaluating their vocal cues, right? So if you know how a person talks, you understand their voice set. Voice qualities are specific features to the voice. So not how you would say something, but these are the modifications. So their pitch, volume, rate. My voice quality would be I have not a super low pitch, but not a high pitched voice either. I typically do tend to talk a little bit louder than most people, and my rate tends to be fast, typically. Now, I might increase my volume to emphasize what I'm saying though. Okay, so voice qualities are on specific features of the voice. And then vocal characterizers, these are additional sounds we make while we're speaking. They might not be related to speech patterns. So saying or ah, or clearing your throat. When you yawn like I just did, and you have a vocal sound with that. That might not be related to your speech pattern. And it can be placed on a continuum of a positive to a negative. So laughing can be perceived as a positive, but burping while others are talking, negative, right? So they're on this continuum. Okay. Next, we move to accents versus dialects. So know what they are. An accent is a different way of that things are said. So um, soda versus, oh no, sorry. Accents are different ways things are said. So saying Appalachia versus Appalachia. It's the same word. Dialects are different words that are used to reference the same thing. Okay? I feel like I'm going to sneeze. Hang on a second. Okay, I'm back. So dialects, like I said, different words, same thing. Pop, soda, Coke. If you're from the South, everything's a Coke. Hey, can you get me a Coke? Yeah, sure. Mountain Dew, please. What flavor, what kind, right? Pop, where I'm from, it's pop. Some people say soda, but they're wrong. It's pop. Um, and then other places, it just kind of depends where you're going or where you're at. That is, those are the different ways that we refer to a carbonated beverage, right? Next, we have the three dimensions of how we respond to speech along. So let's get back to the slides. Oh, not speech along. Sorry, how we respond to speech along three dimensions. So socio-intellectual status. We can tell status, occupation, income, and literacy. And these dimensions help us determine how we're going to judge vocal cues. Aesthetic quality, how pleasing or displeasing does the voice sound? And dynamism, how aggressive, loud, or active the voice is. Okay. Next is the easy versus more difficult emotions to hear in vocal cues. So what are they? Easiest to hardest. We have the easiest time telling anger and sadness. I can tell when somebody's angry or sad. Second, we can tell if they're joyful. Third, or joyful or fearful. Those are the second. And third is disgust. We have the hardest time hearing disgust in people's voices. All right. And then finally from chapter 6 is the hesitation, silences, and pauses. So it's page 94, 95 in our workbook. Let's get there. All right. So silence can actually communicate. You've heard the saying, silence is deafening. And this provides a great deal of information about our thoughts, emotions, attitudes, and relationships with others. Right? So maybe we're not communicating because we're deep in thought. We're thinking about something serious going on, or we're sad or stressed about things going on, or we don't agree with something that somebody else said. So it's better to keep our mouth shut. It can also tell our relationship with others. So if I'm not talking to you, maybe I'm in a fight with this person or I'm no longer friends with this person. Pauses are a little bit different. So they're they are not as long as silence, and they're not always distributed evenly throughout speech. So it can occur at grammatical junctures, so words like and or but that grammatically make sense, or non-grammatical junctures, so random stoppage mid-sentence. You might just quit talking for a second, right? And there are some types of pauses. The unfilled pauses, so vocal activity stops entirely, or filled pauses. These are the interpretations of interpretations in the stream of speech, audible sounds such as like. Okay, let's see. Da, 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 da. Trying to find where. All right, and then hesitations. Hesitations are those speech latencies where, you're trying to think of something to say. So make sure you know hesitation, silences, and pauses from page 94 and 95 of the workbook, because you will need to know them. All right, so that's the end of chapter 6. If you have any questions over that chapter specifically, email me. I'll be happy to answer anything. All right, chapter 7, the effects of physical characteristics on human communication. So universal perspective versus individual perspective of perceiving attraction. So universal is, these are the traits that majority of people find to be attractive. So a symmetrical face, the rule of thirds, the top of your forehead to the tip of your nose should be 2/3 of your face, right? These are the universal things that across cultures, people typically find them to be attractive. Individual is the attractiveness level is based at the individual level, meaning the beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So it may not be what everyone finds to be attractive. It might just be, I find this attractive, right? Maybe your significant other has a big nose and most people don't find them to be attractive. However, you think it works for them and you find them attractive. Second question is knowing about being socially satisfied. It asks, are attractive people more socially satisfied? What about women who are overtly or overly attractive? Are they satisfied in dating? So, first question, yes. People who are attractive are more socially satisfied because they have the pick of the litter, basically, right? They could basically be with anybody. Overly attractive women are seen as less satisfied, however, because they are seen as unapproachable and therefore get asked on less dates, right? They could have anybody they wanted, but because people typically find them to be intimidating or they're so beautiful they could never want me, they're asked out less. What is the matching hypothesis? The matching hypothesis states that we select mates based on our perceived level of our own attractiveness, right? We aren't seeking out the most attractive mate. We look for somebody who has the same attractiveness as us. So think about that matching hypothesis video. Everybody was assigned a number, and then that girl had to basically caption what she was doing. And she's like, oh, this guy came up to me and tried to shake my hand. He's a 3. I can do better. I can do better. Remember? Because she's trying to base it on her own number, even though she doesn't know her own number. And so, with the matching hypothesis, we try to find out, or we try to match somebody similar to our attractiveness level. Next question is knowing the 3 major classifications of body shape in terms of their names, body type, characteristics they describe, and personality traits. This is the ectomorph, endomorph, ectomorph, endomorph, and I can't think of the last one. Mesomorph. Ectomorph, mesomorph, endomorph. So ectomorph, these are the people that are tall and thin. They are underweight compared to their height. They're perceived as sensitive, quiet, and shy, right? Mesomorph, they are muscular and athletic. They have a balanced height to weight ratio, and they are judged as strong, assertive, and confident, as well as competitive. And endomorph, these people are overweight compared to their height, and they are typically described as old-fashioned, friendly, warm, and agreeable. Okay, so make sure you know the names. You're able to differentiate between the 3 of those. Our body and its features pay special attention to height and body image. Height is associated with status, attractiveness, and competence, mainly for men, though, right? When women are tall, they're not perceived the same. Body shape is how people think, feel, or behave with their body image in mind, right? So people who are thin typically have more confidence in themselves because with their body shape in mind, they behave in accordance with that. Okay, so make sure you understand those. Understand the 5 functions of what, sorry. Understand what the 5 functions of clothing are. So, decoration, we use clothing to adorn ourselves, such as dresses on the red carpet, to decorate our body. Protection, thinking about a raincoat, gloves, hats. Sex, think about club dresses, expensive button down shirts, or lingerie. Attitude, business suits. They make us appear to be a go getter. We look the part, we're professional. And then ideology. So this is religious headwear, hijabs, or wearing crosses. And then you need to know the 4 ways that we see personality in clothing. So let's get to that in the slides. So clothing conscious is people notice what I wear, right? I'm conscious about what I put on my body because people notice. This may mean you are an influential other and not necessarily they're noticing the name brands, but if I go out in a t-shirt, a baseball hat, and yoga pants, people notice that, right? And they're going to comment on it. Exhibitionism is wearing whatever you please. So this is the behavior that attracts attention to oneself. So I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to start dressing goth, right? Practicality is function over form. So I'm wearing what's comfortable. I don't care what it looks like. And then designer is living for the clothes and fashion. So name brand, high fashion clothing. Okay, so that's chapter 7. If you have any questions over that specifically, go ahead and shoot me an email. Chapter 8 was chronemics, so using time to communicate. So what is chronemics? Well, it's how time affects communication. It is time and how it impacts our communication. So, today was a perfect example. My chronemics impacted communication because I was supposed to do the exam review at 1 p.m. I woke up at 1:46 after 11, 12, 1, almost 4 hours of a nap because I didn't sleep last night. That impacts our communication. You might be upset with me, and you have every right to be. I did not uphold what I said I was going to, what we had planned. So I'm really sorry about that. So understanding what is chronemics. So knowing the 5 psychological reactions to time and what they mean. Let's get to that slide. First is past negative. So this is when you view your past negatively and that past still upsets you. So if both of your parents died and you were sent to live with your grandma and then she died, right? You would view your childhood as pretty sad. It'd be pretty negative, and therefore that would still upset you. Past positive, this is what most people have. You have a nostalgic view of your past. When you think about your childhood, you have good thoughts. Playing catch with mom or dad. I remember my dad would pick me up for school, and he worked third shift. So he'd take me to school, go home for sleep for a couple hours, pick me up from school, and we would come home, jump on the trampoline for about a half hour together, and then I'd come in, he'd make me lunch, and then he'd go to bed, right? So Essentially, I was taking care of myself at a young age, which I don't know how safe that is, but I knew the rules. I could watch TV, I could play quietly, but I have a pretty nostalgic view of my past. Present hedonistic. This is where you think about the pleasures of the present and not the consequences in the future, right? So, when you go out to the club and you take a person home and you realize when you get home that you want to hook up with them, but you don't have any protection available. You're thinking about, whatever, this is fun, this is great, this makes me happy right now. But that one night stand could lead to STDs and or an unplanned pregnancy, right? You're not really thinking about, do I want to be tied to this person for the next 18 years? Present fatalistic. So you feel like you're stuck in your everyday routine, it is mundane, and you're unable to change your future. It doesn't matter what you have going on or how you try to fix it or change it, you are just stuck and your future is just set. And then future focused. So you focus on accomplishing goals that are important to your future. So still attending classes and doing things in the online setting because you know that this is important for your future to graduate and get whatever job that you want. Um, so understanding cultural use of chronemics, so the technical versus formal time. Technical time is a measurement of variable and time. So 1 hour and 15 minutes, right? That's how long our classes are expected to be on Tuesday, Thursday. We meet for 1 hour and 15 minutes. Formal time is how cultures teach and learn time, so use of the seasons. We know that there are 4 seasons in a year. Our year starts off in winter, it moves to spring in March, and then about 3 months later in June, it is summer until September when it starts fall, and then in November, winter starts up again. Is it November? Maybe it's December. I don't know. Winter's the longest month. But we learn these, measurements of time, and that's how we teach time to other people as well. Understand time as location. So, time as location is meet me at a specific time, right? Dinner's at 4, class is at 1, the game starts at 6. Time as duration is how long events should last. So, the Cubs playing the Pirates, game starts at 1, we should be out of there by 4, right? How long should events last? Class should be about an hour and 15 minutes. Your sister's ballet recital should be about an hour, but those things seem to drag on. And then intervals, this is the time and space between events and how we see events, right? So, talking to our parents. I talk to my mom every day, right? That's important to me. So I see that event as important. But there are some people I talk to every once in a blue moon, a great while. So understand how each of those impacts our communication and what they are. So that is all from chapter 8. If you have any questions over that, please don't hesitate to email me. Chapter 9, which is our eye behaviors. So know the intrinsic, iconic, and arbitrary eye behaviors. So we'll get into those. Intrinsic codes means that we are super or hypersensitive when humans look at us. So we tend to blush when someone asks us an embarrassing question using eye contact. So cause and effect, it's biological. Direct eye contact with attractive strangers is likely to activate a pleasure receptor in the brain, so cause and effect. You looked at me, I think you're attractive, therefore I blush. right? So it's all about the biological, sorry. Iconic codes is about deception, forced eye contact. So we force eye contact to look like we're telling the truth, but really we aren't. Um, we might use exaggerated stares, maybe to show anger. So we look like we're angry, even though we don't have the actual anger expression on, right? Iconic codes, your mom is upset with you and she just looks at you and she's like, right? She doesn't have the, visual anger, these 11s, as people call them, those lines. I've got really big scowl lines, frown lines. Um, but we know that her mom is angry. And then arbitrary, our gazing norms do change across culture. So how we use eye contact here is different than other cultures, and it's important to know that. Gaze versus mutual gaze. So let's get to that slide. Gaze is an individual's looking behavior. It may or may not be at the other person, right? So I could be staring just past you or just over your head, but it is my individual looking behavior or your individual looking behavior. Mutual gaze is when two interactants are knowingly looking at each other. So when I say, hey, pick a partner for this activity, and you look over at your best friend and you're like, hey, right? And they're looking at you and you're both looking at each other, but you're knowingly doing it. It's not accidental. Okay. 5 functions of gazing. It's in the feedback on 116 and 117, but I'm going to go through it now. All right, so we use gazing to regulate the flow of communication, right? We look at someone and continue to look at them often after or often until we have begun our interaction, right? So you're going to shake someone's hand, you look them in the eyes until you have started speaking to them. It occurs when we want to signal the communication channel is open. We also use it to close or end communication. So saying goodbye, we look at them until the interaction is over. Monitoring feedback. When people want feedback concerning reactions of others, they gaze at the other person, right? So if someone is looking at us while speaking, it generally provides some sort of feedback that they're interested in what we're saying. We use it to express emotion. So glancing at the eye area provides information about emotions that are being expressed. So tears, whether sadness or joy. Lack of eye contact, sadness, shame, modesty, embarrassment. Winking, that tells a lot about what people are feeling and what they feel towards you. Expressing nature. So, wait a second. Yeah, communicating the nature of the interpersonal relationship. Relationships are characterized by different status levels, and that can be reflected in eye behaviors. So low status individuals show their respect by gazing at higher status people, but higher status people don't feel the need to gaze at lower status people. Eye contact, as expected, is greater in intimate relationships. So the more comfortable we are with a person, the more prolonged eye contact we feel comfortable making. Distance. So, oh wait, no, that's conditions. I'm sorry. Right, so status and intimacies of relationships communicate the interpersonal nature. There are 5 conditions influencing gazing patterns. I was getting ahead of myself by going into the next question. So the first is distance. So gazing and mutual gazing increase as distance increases. So as we get closer to one another, we stop staring at them because you're closer to them. We tend to have less visual contact when we feel too close in distance, right? You're not going to stare at somebody when they are very close to you. Physical characteristics, so objects and people in our environment change our gaze. So taking in unfamiliar stimuli, we tend to gaze more. But we do condition ourselves not to stare. So kids often stare because they don't know any better. However, adults tend to gaze and then they look away. And then they might gaze again because it's unfamiliar. It's a new person, it's a new object. Personality characteristics. So emotional, physical, and personality characteristics influence our eye behaviors. So higher intelligence levels use more gazing. Lower self-esteem individuals use less gazing. And more extroverted, agreeable, or open people are going to gaze more as well. So topics and tasks can also change our gazing patterns. So happy, upbeat topics, gazing happens more frequently. If we're engaged in intimate conversations with someone that we don't have an intimate relationship with, we do tend to look away. If we have an intimate conversation with someone that we do have an intimate relationship with, more gazing occurs. When we're trying to persuade people or we want them to engage in more gazing, or not want them to. When we're trying to persuade people, we want them to do something, we engage in more gazing, right? So we want our mom to let our friend stay over. We look her in the eyes more often, or we look at her facial area, her eye area more often, okay? So that is chapter 9. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. The Munn, Janigo, and Johnson study about tattoos was from chapter 9. Wasn't it? I'm just kidding. It was not from chapter 9. I think it was chapter 7. I should have gone over it with chapter 7, so I'll circle back at the end. And then chapter 10, this was the first lecture that we covered via video lectures. So you are supposed to know the theoretical perspectives. So evolutionary perspective, we use deception as a survival mechanism. So we lie to protect ourselves, or we deceive to protect ourselves and our family. This is where survival of the fittest comes in, and if we are effective at telling lies and detective lies, we are biologically favored. The leakage hypothesis is deception is associated with internal physiological responses. So these responses are measurable and or noticeable. So heart rate, blood pressure, those are all measurable, but sweating, that's noticeable, right? So our responses are measurable and or noticeable. Deceivers do attempt to compensate for these details. So I know that heart rate is a way to, excuse me, to measure if I'm using deception. So I try to control that. Receivers try to notice these tells. Interpersonal deception theory places greater emphasis on social, interactive, and process-oriented nature of deception. So social are social relationships. Interactive is deception happens and it's detected through interaction, so us talking. And process-oriented is based on the process. So we've got our pre-interaction, interaction, and post-interaction. Pre-interaction, we have to know what is my familiarity with the other, what are my goals of trying to deceive or pick up on the deception, what are the characteristics that I have and the skills that I have, what are the characteristics and skills of the other. This leads to the interaction that is constantly flowing between the sender and the receiver. So there's perceived suspicion or acceptance of how I'm deceiving, and then using strategic or non-strategic behaviors. So strategic is that evading behaviors, staring someone right in the eyes while lying. Non-strategic is kind of squirming around while lying. Your voice might have a higher pitch. For the receiver, again, you look for the behaviors that are signaling suspicion or acceptance using strategic or non-strategic behaviors. Post-interaction, the sender would hope to have successful deception. Post-interaction for the receiver, they would have success, or they would hope to have successful deception detection. So looking for that and actually calling people out on lying or getting away with it. So for IDT, deception happens in a dynamic interaction between people who have their own relationships, motivations, and goals, right? We've all got our own reasons for using deception. The more positive the relationship, the more we expect people to be truthful. The bottom line of IDT is deception is this process that's based on the context of the relationship of interactants, right? We've been friends for 15 years. I wouldn't expect that you would deceive me. But IDT also focuses on the moves and counter moves of the sender and the receiver that are both strategic, so very well and carefully planned, versus unstrategic. You're just kind of going for it. Self-presentation theory is another theory we talk about. Deception is often used to bolster credibility for creating a positive impression, right? So I lie and tell you that I play the guitar because I want to impress you. The motivation and pair effect is the more a liar wants to succeed, however, the more anxiety and overlooked nonverbal presentations occur, meaning the more they're going to fail. So the biggest contribution is deception is used strategically as a communicative strategy in self-presentation theory. And then finally is the four-factor theory. So deception can produce various signs: attempted control. The deceiver, so the person who's using deception to send a message, attempts to look and sound truthful, can be a clue to the deception. Sorry, there was a really weird sound in my house and I don't know where it came from. So deception produces various signs, and these can be poorly timed gestures and expressions, awkward gestures, mismatched nonverbal, so you're smiling while doing a nervous gesture, or vice versa. You're doing a nervous smile while doing gestures. The second is physiological arousal. So this is visible and audible signs of arousal. So eye blinking, speech hesitations, changes in vocal pitch. Third is displays of emotions. So you conceal emotions or you fake emotions, producing leakage, right? Concealing, you smile, but you quickly hide it. Micro expressions reveal suppressed emotions. So I'm trying to conceal, but I give this little hint of a smile that I'm happy about something. And then fake smiles don't activate the muscles around the eyes, and therefore it produces leakage of your deception. And then the fourth in the four-factor theory is cognitive processing. The cognitive load increases because lying is much harder than telling the truth. So we see signs of thinking. This could be eye movement, response latencies, and speech hesitations. Okay. Next question was be able to identify the four functions of lying by name and know what each means. So, functions of lying is to save face, right? I don't want to make myself look bad. I don't want to make you look bad, so I lie. To avoid tension or conflict, I tell somebody, yeah, you look great in that dress, because I don't want to create a conflict between us. To expand or reduce relationships, I lie and tell, somebody that I can cook really well because I want to expand on relationships. Or I lie and say, no, I can't go with you to that. I have a dentist appointment, but really, I just didn't want to hang out with you. And then impression formation, right? Um, Posting good pictures on Instagram to give off the impression that you are a hot, attractive, young, single person, right? I want you to have a good impression of me. Lying on your resume, that's another one, impression formation. Know the 4 bottom line conditions that have to be met by the lie catcher in order to catch liars. So back to the slides. All right, so this is Frank and Svetieva's 2013 bottom line conditions that must be met by the lie catcher. First, the stakes must be high enough to produce emotional clues. So the deception has to be big enough to produce these behaviors that are going to give off the fact that the sender is lying. Second, behaviors must be accessible to the judge, meaning the receiver of the message has to be close enough to see the behaviors. Right? I can't be so far away that I can't tell these behaviors, these eye behaviors that are going on. Third, the judge must detect these behaviors, right? So the sender might not look at the right place at the right time or do these awkward gestures, but the receiver has to be looking at the right place at the right time as well. So, not staring because it's impolite. So I'm close enough to see these behaviors, but I have to be able to tell that you are trying to deceive me. And then fourth, the judge must correctly interpret their behaviors. So many behaviors might look like signs of deception, but they could be something else too. I might be looking away. I'm sorry. I might be looking away and you might think it's a sign of deception, but really it's because I'm stressed and I'm trying to save my cognitive resources. Okay. And then finally, in chapter 10, know the factors that change the odds of catching a lie in the liar's favor. All right. So communication skills, some people are better liars because they have better communication skills. Communication skills, if you want to be a good liar, you need to have these good skills. You also need to understand the beliefs and perceptions and behaviors of catchers, right? So catchers believe these false stereotypes of liars are prevalent, right? Looking to the left when lying, saying lots of ums or uhs. Understanding the truth bias, that I have no reason to believe that you're not telling the truth. And therefore, I have to be aware that catchers believe this. And then finally, there's disbelief in the liar, and that produces suspicious behaviors in catchers, right? So there's automatically this disbelief. So I have to make it, I have to, I have to make it so you don't have this disbelief. I have to decrease your disbelief in me as the liar. Okay, so that's chapter 10. As always, if you have questions, please feel free to email me. All right, so I'm going to open chapter 7 back up to try and get the eCampus reading. Munjanigo and where the heck? All right, chapter 7. Munjanigo and Johnson. All right, So the question asks, and it's the reading, what were the meanings behind the tattoos that the women in the study reported? So there were meaning of tattoo themes. So it was a connection to self, life events, relationships, spiritual meaning, or no meaning, right? So they connected these tattoos um, to their self, things that were going on in their life, their personal relationships that were important, as well as, you know, faith, belief in a spiritual, or in spirituality, I should say. The meanings did change based on life transitions or reinterpretation of an impulsive act, right? Like, oh, I got this tattoo when I was drunk. But then you realize, like, oh no, it was when I was drunk, but really it means this. They also found that there were changes to self perception and behaviors. So it gave these women a confidence boost and empowerment, right? I feel badass. I feel confident in myself. I can take on anything that is thrown at me. And then the behaviors were they either wore clothes specifically to show off their tattoo or they wore clothes specifically to hide their tattoo. Okay, so make sure you understand those from the reading as well. Again, I do want to apologize. I'm so, so sorry that I overslept. It's no excuse to be stressed and to, you know, stay up literally all night and then go to bed at 10. But I am so sorry, and I hope that you do accept my apology and watch this video to, study for the exam. If you have any questions, email me. If it's multiple questions, I might tell you that we'll set up a Zoom meeting. At a specific time. The exam will open up at 6 a.m. on Monday and be open until Friday. You should download the exam document and the exam answer document. I want you to place all your multiple choice answers on the exam answer document and turn that in. That's going to be easiest for Noah and I to grade, especially because Noah has 2 sections that he is GTA for, and there's so many of you. So please help us out in any way that you can. Okay? If you have any questions, like I said, please don't hesitate to email me. All right. Have a great day. Best of luck studying and best of luck on the exam next week. Bye.